We are joined with Kobe, Russ, myself again. Super excited to talk a little bit more about Kobe, his journey, especially in collegiate football. I know that football, man, I've talked to so many athletes in that space, and everybody's journey is so uniquely different. And there's a few things about Kobe that makes his different as far as his time in college, especially at the level he was playing at. But again, Kobe, do you mind for everybody tuning in and listening in today? Can you just give a brief introduction, listen to your name, the college and university that you did attend, as well as the sport that you played?
Absolutely, man. First of all, thank you for having me. It's fun to be on the other side of this. It's very refreshing. But my name's Kobe Manzo. I just graduated in the spring from Northern Michigan University, a D2 up in Marquette, Michigan, in the Upper Peninsula that people sometimes cease to know exists, but it very much does. It's an awesome place up here. I played football, like you said. Played has air quotes around it for those maybe listening, because I had 3 knee surgeries and never actually saw the field. But it's much easier in small talk. Just tell them I played at Northern, and that's usually as far as the conversation goes. Otherwise, host of the D1 Rejects podcast, talk all about small school football, and I currently work at Northern Michigan as our digital media manager for athletics.
Looking back on your journey, right? I know it's hard because for myself, right, there's a ton of things that I had to manage. It was academics, it was athletics, it was trying to balance that personal life as well, right? Trying to manage relationships, friendships, things like that. But when you look back at your experience during that college scene, how did that shape you both as a student athlete, but also just as a person?
Yeah, that's a great question. Kind of like I told you before, and I tell everyone, the first injury of the first of the 3 knee surgery was the best thing to ever happen to me. Right after that, I got my first internship working at a local news station. I really started to dive into D1 Rejects and found out how much I really wanted to put into this and how much I enjoyed it. I think most importantly, the first surgery, excuse me, did so much for me. The second and third can kick rocks. Those sucked, and I will never tell anyone that yeah, obviously I learned my deal from the first one, and I wouldn't change anything about the entire journey. But man, those second and third ones sucked. You work so hard year round to come back and be cleared, and then continue to work all the way up until that moment. My first one was day 1 of sophomore year of camp, and then I rehab all year, day 5 of junior year. And then you do it again, and you don't even make it to camp because you do it in the weight room the third time. So it shaped me as a person, I think, because it's given me perspective, which I think is an easy answer for someone in this situation. But what I talk to a lot of people now who have gone through injuries up here at Northern, I've kind of become the resident knee guy or injury guy in general, where somebody blows a knee or has some kind of season-ending injury. I feel like I end up usually being the one they come to talk, and I'm usually the one that initiates the conversation because there's a lot of people that don't want to have those kind of talks. And honestly, I think I wear that with a badge of honor, and that helps given that perspective is that I think it's a great sign of respect and admiration if you're going to go talk to someone about something that's so close to your heart. So that's what I try and tell all the athletes up here is like, man, if someone is confiding in you and after an injury or something that changes their life in that way, that means they trust you, first of all, but also they admire the way that you've kind of bounced back and carried yourself through that. So I think as a person, it's humbled me a lot because I think I've been gracious enough or grateful enough to have the chance to speak in some of these other people's journeys, but also the perspective of football at the end of the day is just a game. And for me, it was a means to affording education a lot easier. And I never had pro aspirations. So it's got me to this point. I've made great relationships and the values that I've learned through the sport have changed me, I think, holistically.
Yeah, and I like that too, just acknowledging the perspective right now, right? Because I think sometimes we get so ingrained, especially at, a young age, even high school, where, hey, our ultimate goals, Division 1 or bust, right? Or it's the professionals or bust.
Heck
And
yeah.
a lot of times us as athletes, anything else is either considered a failure, disappointment, you name it. We're not, we're more ashamed that saying, hey, I'm committed to a JUCO versus, hey, I'm committed to a D1,
Yeah.
when it's still a commitment. You're still playing at the next level.
Amen.
So it's awesome to take that perspective that you have and saying, hey, somebody trusts me now. Now people who have injuries on campus come to me and say, hey, what was that like, right? What was the mentality like when you were trying to recover and come back? Super, super cool. But I know for us as athletes, especially for myself, right? I'll admit it. One thing that was hard for me was trying to balance academics as well as athletics, right? We're going to school, we're there to get our degree. We also have to maintain a certain GPA, take certain classes in order to meet requirements, be eligible, all of that. But at the same time, we have the demands on the field as well. And it can be tough, right? Because if we put all of our eggs in one or the other basket, sure, we might be, a standout student, but at the same time, we might start, slipping a little bit in practice or the games. But at the same time, too, if we focus all our attention into sports, hey, you know what? We might start slipping up in the classroom. We're not eligible. Coach now is having to talk with us.
Yeah.
Might not, might lose some trust in us, things like that. But ultimately, Kobe, during that student athlete journey in college, how was that balance for you being a student athlete? How are you able to manage the demands on the academic side as well as the athletic side?
Yeah, no, it can be tough, and I think a lot of it is situation based. And I'll be the first to tell you, I graduated with a multimedia journalism degree, Northern Michigan University, great school. Certainly is not the Harvard of the Midwest. It's not like one of the toughest schools to get into in the area. So I'm not going to sit here and act like I've had the hardest path of being a student athlete because while I did maintain really great grades in the classroom. It wasn't like it was this whole endeavor for me. I also had a great upbringing. Both my parents were former educators. My dad was a longtime teacher at the high school level. My mom was an admin at all three levels, all through my kind of education career. So that has been always for me placed at the forefront. And I think I took that for granted for a long time because I know a lot of people when I got up here who were very much in different shoes or came from different backgrounds where that education and that emphasis on school was not always priority number one or priority A. And I think that was the biggest thing for me to understand is not everyone is wired the same way. And that's why football is such a great sport, is because football is the ultimate team sport, one, but it's just a melting pot. The locker room is a melting pot of a bunch of different people. And people always pull the race card immediately of like, oh, we have people from all different races. Like that's just the surface. Like when you get behind that, there are people that tick in so many different ways and people that have so many different priorities. And so that's why football is so unique, because you have to get all these people that have different priorities and different motivators to buy into the same thing. That is hard. That is so hard. But to get back to your question, the balancing piece of it, I think, goes back to and I think it's kind of a common misconception is someone who is injured maybe doesn't have as much involvement when it comes to sport. I would argue the opposite, and that you have more involvement. I know my personal experience, which I can speak on, of course, is that yes, my class obligations are still there. My sport obligations, my meetings, my lift, my practice, those kind of things are still there. But then on top of that, you're going on your own time to rehab. You're going on your own time to recovery and being in the training room and being around those kind of people. So I think I learned very quickly the time management skill, and that's what people talk about going into college. For me, being injured accelerated that process and made me learn how to be the most efficient with my time. And I think the other part of that question too of how to manage that is like accept help. Like accept help from people. There are so many student athletes out there, I think in particular, that go into this and they end up maybe catching themselves sinking and they don't throw out a lifeline. So many of these universities that I've been around and had the chance to talk to people that work at those institutions or maybe just go to school there are so many great opportunities for that. Whether it's just academic help, it doesn't mean go right to a counselor. Maybe you've got two teammates or another student athlete or somebody else in the class that can sit down with you on a Wednesday night and like put some stuff together. Maybe it is like you have to go see some kind of academic counselor or advisor, excuse me, or some kind of tutor outside of class. So you're gonna have to go and make those commitments. But a lot of times it really is as simple as just asking. And I think people get so concerned with whether it's just the social kind of confrontation or that interaction, excuse me. And that was something I lost when I came in during COVID 2020. People just weren't talking to each other, man. Nobody spoke. Everyone sat there at their desk and did their own thing, and that sucked. So take advantage of it. You got classmates and you got people that are in the same shoes, especially as student athletes. Like throw out a lifeline. There's no shame in that. I think people constantly, myself included, need to get better at accepting help from others.
First and foremost, I heard that Northern Michigan's the Harvard of the UP, so you got to give yourself some credit right there.
And
I
that's
know.
not even true. I can't even say here. Michigan Tech has got us beat there. That's tough. But I have to go on record. I know it. I visited them both. Great engineering school up there. But unless you want to be an engineer, do not go there.
Exactly, exactly. But no, at the end of the day, though, you got to give yourself credit, right? Being an athlete, but also excelling in the classroom as well. And honestly, it's hard to see it a lot of times because Kobe, I'm in that same boat where I've seen it firsthand with other athletes who are struggling in the classroom, and the resources are, I want to say, readily available. To your point, right? Even reaching out to a teammate, reaching out to maybe it's a friend in the class, things like that. And I don't know if it's more shame or a sense of, hey, somebody like that pride, right? Where, hey, I'm
Yeah.
asking somebody for help and now they're thinking either less of me or anything like that. But I mean, I'll be the first one to say it. I'm sure that you can probably attest to it too. But anytime that somebody asks me and they reach out and say, hey, you know what? I got a question. I need some help on something. Never for a second do I start thinking, man, boy, I'm thinking less of Kobe for asking that. That man, holy cow, anything like that. It's, hey, what can I do to help him out, right? And
Hmm.
so I think that that's a super super cool
I go back
topic and
to,
lesson.
not to cut you off, Josh, but I go back
Yeah.
to my seventh grade football season, probably the best example of this. My good friend, Jesus Cruz, and he was one of our D tackles, absolutely great kid. Again, coming from a spot where his parents weren't going on to be in college graduates, and very different situation than my own, but a great kid who took things seriously. He wasn't not putting in any effort, but just struggled in different areas. And it took a lot for, I remember him to come to me and be like, Kobe, like this math class is killing me. And I remember sitting in my like computer room. I feel like homes don't have like little home offices anymore, which is weird. But I remember sitting in mine with him and him being scared of my like my yellow lab because sitting there doing math Excel online. And like I know for him in that moment, like a seventh grade kid, to go to one of your teammates and ask for help with like math homework, like that was a lot. But we kept Jesus eligible, and he went on to be one, a great player for us. Like he was a dude on the defensive side of the ball, but two, finishing up high school and like doing a great job there. He has a kid now, and like that is something where he gets through those deals. He's working now, got a kid, and starting that next phase of his life, which I'm super proud of him for that. But and not to say that Math Excel is what got him there, but I think that's just a great example of like he was able to come and ask, and I was more than happy to help him out.
Definitely. And if you're one of those athletes too out there, don't ever be afraid to ask to a friend, a teammate, a coach, you name it, resources on campus. All those people are there to help you guys grow and just be there of resource. So never be ashamed. Always take advantage of people offering and being able to help out. But as we kind of talk more about just mental health and athletics, I know that over the past how many 3 4 5 years, obviously it's been around the entire time, but I feel like it's beginning to gain a lot more traction, right? Professional athletes are talking about their journey, what they're going through, even at the collegiate level as well. And I know, Kobe, for yourself, your story will probably revolve a lot around injuries, right? And
Yeah.
dealing with the mental side of that. But for you, how do you believe, whether it's, on the injury side, whether it's just in all of sports itself, how do you believe that, mental health really affects us as athletes?
I think the first and foremost, I guess before I get into that, it's very real, and the best indicator of that is that the NCAA has actually like acknowledged it. And say what you want about the NCAA, they do a lot of things that are backwards to say nicely, but they're starting to finally get around on this. And you've got new mandates that are coming down at the Division 1 level, now even down to Division 2, which I can certainly speak on being up here at Northern. That schools now have to provide those resources, like they have to. It is written into these NCAA like bylaws or whatever the kind of the regulations or legislation, excuse me, is. And I think that's the biggest indicator of like this is real. And there's so many other statistics and other things out there that will tell you the same thing, but it's easy to shrug off a number, I think, for a lot of people until it affects you. Great example of that, not to go on a total tangent, you hear about cancer, breast cancer, things of these nature all the time, and yeah, of course that's something that affects so many people. You don't realize it until I'm about to go on a spring break trip and my mom sits me down in my bedroom and tells me that she's got carcinoma. And now you're like, oh, I've seen numbers across Instagram and Twitter, and I've seen these great pieces about people overcoming these stories that have moved me, but now it's affecting me. And I think that's just an example that again is separate, but obviously affects mental health as well as physical health, in that people aren't fully understanding, I think, and maybe giving the credit to this issue until it affects them or someone close to them. And I think that should be maybe where the narrative is maybe changed a little bit. And it's hard because I know people can shrug off statistics, and it's hard to really acknowledge it until it does affect you or somebody that you know. For example, up here, up at Northern, just a few years ago, we unfortunately had a student athlete on our track team that took her own life. And that was a really tough piece. And we also had a kid in our football team actually the same day that attempted to do the same. And thankfully, he was unsuccessful in his attempt. And I remember being around that team. I shoot photo and video here at the university, and I've almost never felt a burden of like having to go shoot something in my life. I get to go shoot things. That's the mindset I try to keep. That was tough. I had to go shoot the track team send off when they went off to their next meet, and all of our student athletes gathered around them and helped, encourage them to get onto the bus. It was people were clapping and people were cheering, but it was somber. It was very somber. And I know here at Northern, the mindset has changed drastically. Not that it was terrible before, but the mindset and the focus has changed drastically since that moment. I think the goal would be to avoid that being the catalyst at other institutions. That's the really hard part. Because I tell you right now, I sit in our morning admin meetings and things every week. Now being a part of the athletic staff here at Northern, and that is talked about on the forefront. We have multiple people in there that are constantly looking out for the student athletes, and also we've got a bunch of people in there that are former student athletes who understand this process. And so when it comes to mental health in my journey, I think, yes, the injuries are a big part of it, but I think being able to see both sides of it now, one is a student athlete and now someone who works in the department, and seeing that the differences there and how people handle and manage that, that's the biggest thing I would go back to is there's got to be a way where that unfortunate event cannot be the catalyst for an institution to really pick it up and get things going.
Yeah, I agree. It's far too common to hear a lot of the stories. When I talk a lot more with athletes now, even people on the sports psychologist side, a lot of the times they're telling me and informing me because, hence I don't follow every single school in the nation, but they tell me, those sad realities of, hey, we really didn't have anything in place until, this unfortunate tragic event took place, 5, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And, now it's been something that they've slowly started to integrate. So it's good that the NCAA is starting to, hear about that. But at the end of the day, too, it's, hey, what can we do to emphasize that, right? Make it
Mm-hmm.
better and give them more resources. But looking back, I know that when I had my injury in college, I felt fairly supported, right? From, not only the coaches, but also, the athletic trainers kind of helping rehab
Yeah.
and be there throughout that time. And, I'd say it was, decently successful. I didn't have any complaints, but, what was that support system like for you when you sustained those injuries? And how did they help you ultimately go from, hey, I'm that injured athlete all the way up to, hey, you know what? I'm ready for that next practice, for that next workout, getting you back in that game shape?
See, I think I got the best of both worlds in that regard. One, I have an incredible support system, whether that's my family, my parents, who both of which have relocated to Marquette. So being here for that was incredible. Having them here, my girlfriend, who I've been with going on 2 years now, going through some of those with her. I remember actually one of our first times being together was like 2 days off surgery, like my first time moving around, like trying not to just have my knee buckle and embarrass myself on one of our first dates. But I had a great support system in that way, and people that were very caring for me and going out of my way to do things and it really helped me along in that process. That goes the same for my athletic training kind of staff and the people that assisted me there, whether it was at Northern or UP Rehab, that kind of thing. Then I had the other side of like the coaching staff that I came into with Coach Nystrom and company, who were great individuals and I had great relationships with. But man, they were tough, hard-nosed, old-school guys. And I remember tearing my knee up the second time in camp and walking back in the dome to where we play, or being carted back, I should say, and getting off. And Nice comes to see me, my head coach, and looks at me and he says, well, get you fixed up, get you back for next year. That was it. Handshake on the way. And some people might think that's callous and bad, but I needed that. I needed that. You talk about perspective, man. That's perspective. That is a lot of perspective. In the grand scheme of things, we'll get you fixed up and we'll get you back for next year. And I think really what that is from him saying to me is his trust in me, because he knows that after I get fixed up, I'm going to do everything in my power to get myself ready to be back on the field and support this team and these guys, because I really do care about them. And I think I got the best of both worlds in that way. And I think you need both. I think you need people that are nurturing and around you, and that usually comes from people like your family who really care about you. And I also think you need people to push you and push you really hard. And that you can get some great people on the rehab side of things that will do that. But I think a great coach or other kind of outside voice or mentor is very important in that role as well. And I think too much of one or the other, yeah, that could be bad, but you need to have a little bit of both. And so for me, when it comes to injuries, I think that was the biggest thing that stood out, is I had some great people that nurtured me and really helped me along through that process carefully. And I had some people that were pushing me really hard and trusted. And I think that weighed on me a little bit. They trust and they believe that I'm going to attack this thing and really get back to it. And so I can't let them down. That was part of the motivation for me. I can't let my coaches down. I can't let my teammates down, and do that. And if you go through this process and you don't ultimately get back to it, are you letting them down? No, absolutely not. Like that should not be the end all be all, but I think you can certainly use that as motivation.